Let me ask you if you think that what you've been describing to us is a particularly what others have called a gendered style of leadership, as opposed to a masculine style of leadership. Do you think what you've been describing? And is that what your leadership has represented?
I think that it's probably a combination of the two, because most of the leaders with whom I've worked have been males, and I'm not the first female president of the NEA, and nor am I the first female. Was I the first female president of the VEA? I know I'm not the first minority president of the NEA. There have been four. A lot of people don't know that. But some of it I think is gender-based in that I think women tend to be more willing to sit down and try to talk it through and work it out. I think women will be more concerned about a person's feelings and not just hammering somebody or putting someone down. I think women are probably more willing to look at different approaches to things. And that doesn't, I don't think that's a sign of weakness. Matter of fact, what I find when I read a lot of the reports now by business people, they talk about the ability to go in and to deal with the environment, to deal with the people there, and to work with the different ideas as opposed to coming in and being very autocratic. So I think it's a combination of the two. I've learned a lot obviously from watching the men and how do you deal with these issues and stand up, but I've also learned from women. And I've seen some very strong women as leaders.
Now, among these people who were either your predecessors or other people with whom you worked even before the VEA, are there particular mentors or even models that you followed?
Yeah, one of the things that, one person that really influenced me a great deal was a woman named Lori Wen. She was from out in Milwaukee. And Lori was the head of the Black Caucus in NEA for a long time. And I'm going to confess and say, until I saw Lori as a leader, I had never really seen a woman, or maybe paid attention to a woman in a national dynamic leadership role. But she was something else. I mean, Lori challenged the whole NEA structure. If you don't involve more minorities, if you don't do this, we'll walk out. And they didn't believe it, and she led a march. And I was part of the group that walked out. She was, AFT, Al Shanker, indicated he wanted to challenge and debate the leadership of the NEA on the floor of the Representative Assembly. And I found it interesting that when they decided who would debate him, they picked Lori Wen, an African-American woman who was on the executive committee rather than the president or the vice president. And she debated him. And her strategy was interesting. She talked about children. And when she finished, there was a standing ovation. Lori also taught us things like...
What did Shanker talk about?
Shanker talked more about education in general and about the organization. But I remember Lori talking to us about leadership. NEA used to have all these minority leadership conferences, and we used to go to those. And I remember going to those meetings, and Lori would say things like us. She said, you know, we have to be super good. And so I remember some of us sitting in audience saying, well, what do you mean? If I'm equal, I'm equal. She said, no. She said, for us to achieve at the same level as others, we have to be super good. Whatever we do, we have to be doubly good. And if you're going to be a leader, you have to be doubly good. And she also would say, and whether this is true or not, that we oftentimes come in as leaders when the organization's in trouble. And so you're coming in and you spend a lot of your time just trying to rescue the organization.
Now, is she talking to you as minorities?
Right.
Or as minorities, many of whom are women? Because, you know, you always hear that a woman, in order for a woman to succeed, she's got to be twice as good as a man.
No, and this was the whole group.
Okay.
This was the men and the women, all of us there, and she's talking to us as a group. I was tremendously impressed with Leontine Price, you know, and one of the, you know, sometimes, because let's face it, I deal with a lot of racism. I deal with a lot of discrimination. And I was saying to somebody not long ago, you know, it doesn't matter how high you climb, you still deal with it. And one of the things that has kept me going, and whenever I deal with it, I think about Leontine Price when they ask her, I think, is that the right, Marian Anderson is the one, I'm sorry, Marian Anderson, after she was denied the right to sing at the DIR, and you know, she went to the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. Right. They were asked, they said, some people say this is racism. And they said, well, why? Do you think it's racism? And she said, yes. And they said, why? And she said, because, they said, what is racism? She said, it's like a breeze that blows across your face. You can't see it and you can't touch it, but you know it's there. Now, a lot of people, when they hear that, I don't know what they hear, but I hear two things. It's ever present, and it doesn't matter how high you climb, it's there. Now, you got to understand, Marian Anderson was a diva, recognized all over the world, and yet she was denied this right. And so sometimes when I have to deal with racism and discrimination and gender or whatever, I think about her and how she dealt with it. I think about Mary McLeod Bethune and how out of almost nothing she started a college and what a tremendous impact she had on presidents of the United States. And he was a gentle woman, but a very powerful woman. I think about Coretta Scott King, and I had the chance to work with her when I was president of NEA, and how much I used to admire this woman who, through her own sheer determination, was determined that her husband's legacy was going to live on. And I think about a lot of people, you know, that have influenced me, and I listen very carefully to what they have experienced and what's gone on, what has happened to them. And what can I learn from them? I learned patience, I learned determination, I learned to speak up, I learned that I can express my emotions without being viewed as a woman who's overly emotional. I've learned to fight for what I believe in. I've learned to work with people. I mean, when I look at them, I've learned all kinds of things.
Now, isn't there a different style that you might have adopted had you been head or a member of a different kind of organization? After all, you're talking about organizations whose constituency is overwhelmingly female. Suppose
But
you
whose
had
leadership
been,
is not.
But suppose you had been and I'm just grasping here, a plumber. I mean, overwhelmingly male. Do you think you might have developed something different?
Knowing me, I probably would have been pushing for the top, pushing to make a difference, pushing.
But in a different style?
Maybe in a different style, but I would be questioning, why can't women do this? And I think you're right. The profession is 75% female, even though most of the leaders are males. And again, that has to do with women feeling that men should be the head and we should step back. And I always ask the question, why? Why do I have to be, why can't I walk beside Julian? Why do I have to walk behind him? And in some of the male professions, you've got women who have come out and had to fight to open the door and to make a difference for other women. And what I always say is, yes, you fight to open the door, but then you don't close it behind you. When you open the door and keep it open and help other women, other minorities, other leaders come through. And I think it's wrong to open the door and then let yourself in and that's it. But when I think about, I look at other women, and I can't remember names off the top of my head, but I can think about the communications workers, I can think about in the police force, I can think about in the construction industry, where women have made a difference and they've been willing to put themselves out there. And being a leader doesn't mean you always have to be up front, doesn't mean you're always standing behind the podium. A leader is a person who's willing to take the dare, take the chance, and put on those construction pants and that helmet and get out there and say, I can do this too.